2 Esdras, also known as 4, 5 and 6 Ezra, or the Apocalypse of Esdras, is considered to be a non-canonical book but places it as an appendix to the Vulgate. I truly do enjoy this book. It feels as if you get a sense of God's persona through his interaction with Ezra. The most important part is if the prophecy is true and correct. I believe it is, and sadly most scholars still try and find a future fulfillment. With insight we will clearly see this prophecy was already fulfilled. Evidence suggests the oldest scroll was written before 100 AD and the contents places it before 457 BC. And if proven to be accurate, then I will consider it as prophecy. Not the easiest of prophecies, as the Roman Empire was always in turmoil and had divided rulers. A very violent era, when Christians were still martyred. True history makes Game of Thrones seem boring. We already established that Judea was judged in 70 AD and a remnant of believers were scattered to the nations to bless them. The Gentiles came in and Christianity was born. What nobody seems to be able to establish is how the fourth beast kingdom, regarded as the pagan Roman Empire, fell to the conquering saints by the sword or word of God. God states to Ezra that he would receive more detailed information about the Roman Empire, while Daniel was more focused on the plight of the Israelites in 1st century. Daniel's beast was not identified as a specific animal. It had 10 horns. Ezra tells us the last kingdom is an eagle with 3 heads. What we can keep in mind is that in Revelation the beast had 7 heads, characterized as a combination of all the beasts. We might find that the additional 3 heads make up the 10 horns in Daniel. The final destruction of the beast and Jesus, and the saints taking the kingdom. We all agree that it will not supersede the book of Revelation. Instead, we will see if it complements it and give us more information. In the previous video we discussed the 10-week prophecy of Enoch, and we will even see similarities, and hopefully we will increase our understanding of the fulfillment of prophecy, so that we can better understand where we fit in. I will attempt to make the prophecy historically correct with the little information we are provided with, and you can judge and research for yourself. What I can't do is make it more exciting by making it about American presidents or current-day events. I realize we have questions about the time we live in, and by no means do I want to take hope away from people. Instead, I believe that seeing prophecies fulfilled opens our eyes to how amazing God is and that He has been with us and working actively through the ages. We have our role to play and have our own destiny. When we look at how evil our past was, we cannot imagine how any of these prophecies would be fulfilled in our time. Our hope is for world peace and that people will be saved by His grace. Seeing God's creation and plan for His children, we must be careful of the doomsdayers, through their fear-mongering and overwhelming deceptiveness, even those in our midst. I will deconstruct the prophecy first, and then we can look at what Ezra was shown later for the end days of our age. It is important to note that we are not dealing with the end of the world but rather end of ages, and Esdras is dealing with the fourth beast kingdom of Daniel, the eagle. We are dealing with the prophecy in chapter 11, but to make it easier I will add in the interpretation given in chapter 12 in italics. I recommend reading the whole book, as it is mind-blowing. Let's get started in chapter 11. On the second night I had a dream. I saw rising from the sea an eagle that had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. I saw it spread its wings over the whole earth, and all the winds of heaven blew upon it, and the clouds were gathered around it. Here we clearly see the start of the Roman Empire, the eagle, with Julius Caesar as the first of the 12 Caesars and ending with Domitian in 96 AD, represented by the 12 feathered wings. We skipped over the fall of Jerusalem and most prophecies already covered in the book of Daniel. The power of the holy people was already scattered during the reign of Vespasian. And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever that it shall be for a time, times, and an half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. The 3 heads will represent 3 kings, representing regions in the Roman Empire. Heads are used in the same way as in the book of Revelation for kings that had great authority. The eagle that you saw coming up from the sea is the 4th kingdom that appeared in a vision to your brother Daniel. But it was not explained to him as I now explain to you or have explained it. The days are coming when a kingdom shall rise on earth, and it shall be more terrifying than all the kingdoms that have been before it. The Roman Empire was the last and greatest kingdom to have dominion on earth. Daniel tells us about this great beast. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. We continue. I saw that out of its wings there grew opposing wings, but they became little, puny wings. But its heads were at rest, the middle head was larger than the other heads, but it too was at rest with them. Then I saw that the eagle flew with its wings, and it reigned over the earth and over those who inhabit it. And I saw how all things under heaven were subjected to it, and no one spoke against it, not a single creature that was on the earth. We know it is the Roman Empire described in Daniel. Then I saw the eagle rise upon its talons, and it uttered a cry to its wings, saying, Do not all watch at the same time, let each sleep in its own place, and watch in its turn. But let the heads be reserved for the last. And 12 kings shall reign in it, one after another. We start off with the 12 Caesars that ruled one after another, and we will expose the 3 great kings at the end. I looked again and saw that the voice did not come from its heads, but from the middle of its body. I counted its rival wings, and there were 8 of them. The body of the beast has power of these kings, and we are waiting to fulfill Daniel's prophecy. Heads can fall, but the body of the beast will continue till judgment. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. The 8 puny wings will be usurper emperors trying to take power over the empire, but will fail and have short reigns. As I watched, one wing on the right side rose up, and it reigned over all the earth. Julius Caesar, the first Caesar to defeat the Middle East and expand the Roman Empire to the east or right head. He was regarded as the first Caesar and also known for changing times and dates. The Julian calendar. He was seen as a god and a descendant of Venus and Mars. Julius Caesar was elected Pontifex Maximus in 63 BC, the high priest. The official deification of Julius Caesar in Rome took place in 42 BC. And after a time its reign came to an end, and it disappeared, so that even its place was no longer visible. Then the next wing rise up and reigned, and it continued to reign a long time. But the second that is to reign shall hold sway for a longer time than any other one of the 12. The death of Julius Caesar in 44 BC caused the civil war. In 27 BC Augustus was the first Roman emperor, following the Republic, which had been finally destroyed by the dictatorship of Julius Caesar, his great-uncle and adoptive father. The Republic of Rome was created in 27 BC and Augustus regarded as the first and longest reigning emperor. While it was reigning its end came also, so that it disappeared like the first. And a voice sounded, saying to it, Listen to me, you who have ruled the earth all this time, I announce this to you before you disappear. After you no one shall rule as long as you have ruled, not even half as long. Here we find the most concrete proof that we are dealing with actual kings and that they were the 12 Caesars. Caesar Augustus ruled over 40 years, twice as long as any other Caesar, and he was the second Caesar. I don't think anyone can dispute this fact. Then the third wing raised itself up, and held the rule as the earlier ones had done, and it also disappeared. And so it went with all the wings. They wielded power one after another, and then were never seen again. I kept looking, and in due time the wings that followed also rose up on the right side, in order to rule. There were some of them that ruled, yet disappeared suddenly. And others of them rose up, but did not hold the rule. After the death of Nero we had the 4 emperors in 1 year. Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian consolidated power and regained control. They definitely disappeared quite quickly as they were assassinated. This is the interpretation of the 12 wings that you saw. As for your hearing a voice that spoke, coming not from the eagle's heads but from the midst of its body, this is the interpretation. In the midst of the time of that kingdom great struggles shall arise, and it shall be in danger of falling. Nevertheless it shall not fall then. but shall regain its former power. It might be referring to the crisis of the 3rd century, in which climatic changes, renewed pandemic diseases, and internal and external political instability led to the near collapse of the imperial system, also known as the military anarchy or the imperial crisis. 235 to 285 AD was a period in Roman history during which the Roman Empire had nearly collapsed under the combined pressure of repeated foreign invasions, civil wars, and economic disintegration. At the height of the crisis, the Roman state had split into 3 distinct and competing polities. As for your seeing 8 little wings clinging to its wings, this is the interpretation. 8 kings shall arise in it, whose time shall be short and their years swift. We find 8 kings that will influence the destiny of Roman Empire, normally opposing factions and usurpers, but their time will be short-lived. We find out a bit more. 2 of them shall perish when the middle of its time draws near, and 4 shall be kept for the time when its end approaches, but 2 shall be kept until the end. And after this I looked and saw that the 12 wings and the 2 little wings had disappeared. When looking at a timeline, we know Julius Caesar's reign started officially in 46 BC, and the 12 Caesars ended around 96 AD. We then had an era of the 5 good emperors till 190 AD. And after the fall of the 2 little wings we are around halfway. Let's see if we can identify the first 2 little wings. We do not get much information on the 2 puny wings from Esdras, but we see 2 very short reigns of emperors that followed the mad Emperor Commodus. Both seem to have had a hand in his death. Publius Helvius Pertinax, the son of a freed slave, assassinated 3 months into his reign. Marcus Didius Severus Julianus was a wealthy senator that won a bidding auction for favor to become the next emperor. The people were not happy with the corruption, and shortly after he was also killed. If this puts us halfway through the prophecy, we are looking at an end of the beast empire in the 5th century. And nothing remained on the eagle's body except the 3 heads that were at rest and 6 little wings. 6 out of the 8 little wings are left. We will need to find the 4 puny wings closer to the end. We enter into a period known as the crisis of the 3rd century. By 268 AD, the empire had split into 3 competing states: the Gallic Empire, including the Roman provinces of Gaul, Britannia, and Hispania; the Palmyrene Empire, including the eastern provinces of Syria, Palestina, and Egyptus; and the Italian-centered and independent Roman Empire proper. We can now plot the heads as the 3 areas starting from the left. For ease we will call it Gallic, Rome, and the Middle East. As I kept looking, I saw that 2 little wings separated from the 6 and remained under the head that was on the right side, but 4 remained in their place. Then I saw that these little wings planned to set themselves up and hold the rule. As I kept looking, 1 was set up, but suddenly disappeared. Roman Emperor Diocletian ended the crisis of the 3rd century when he became emperor in 285 AD. He reorganized the Roman Empire, dividing it in half and founding the Tetrarchy. Diocletian was the first Roman emperor to share power with more than 1 co-ruler. We note that Diocletian was on the right when he abdicated his power in 305 AD. Instead of selecting co-emperor Maximian's son, the crown prince Maxentius, he made Constantius, the father of Constantine the Great, emperor in the west, and his own son Galerius emperor in the east. We clearly see these 2 wings were under the head on the right and was set up to rule. Constantius ruled the west from May 305 to July 306. It only lasted 14 months. A second also, and this disappeared more quickly than the first. Severus replaced Constantius and was put into power in August 306. He was made emperor of the west by Galerius, who controlled the east, or head on the right. He served an even shorter time of around 10 months and was defeated by Maxentius, son of Maximius. While I continued to look, the 2 that remained were planning between themselves to reign together. We are now looking for the 5th and 6th puny wings. We know that the usurper Maxentius has forcefully taken the throne in the west. Marcus Aurelius Valerius Maxentius was a Roman emperor from 306 until his death in 312. Despite ruling in Italy and North Africa, and having the recognition of the Senate in Rome, he was not recognized as a legitimate emperor by his fellow emperors. He was the son of former Emperor Maximian and the son-in-law of Emperor Galerius. The latter part of his reign was preoccupied with civil war, allying with Maximinus Daza against Licinius and Constantine. Maxentius was the last emperor permanently to reside in Rome. We also find the sixth puny wing, Maximinus, born as Daza. He was Roman emperor from 310 to 313. On the death of Galerius in 311, Maximinus divided the Eastern Empire between Licinius and himself. He became embroiled in the civil wars of the Tetrarchy between rival claimants for control of the empire, in which he was defeated by Licinius. A committed pagan, he engaged in one of the last persecutions of Christians, before issuing an edict of tolerance near his death. When Licinius and Constantine began to make common cause, Maximinus entered into a secret alliance with the usurper Maxentius, who controlled Italy. He came to an open rupture with Licinius in 313. According to Church Father Eusebius, only Christians resisted him. For the men endured fire and sword and crucifixion and wild beasts and the depths of the sea, and cutting off of limbs, and burnings, and pricking and digging out of eyes, and mutilations of the entire body, and besides these, hunger, and mines and bonds. In all they showed patience in behalf of religion rather than transferred to idols the reverence due to God. And the women were not less manly than the men in behalf of the teaching of the divine word, as they endured conflicts with the men, and bore away equal prizes of virtue. And when they were dragged away for corrupt purposes, they surrendered their lives to death rather than their bodies to impurity. We continue. And while they were planning, one of the heads that were at rest, the one that was in the middle, suddenly awoke. It was greater than the other two heads. Here we see the rise of Constantine the Great. The first of the three heads were set up. Constantine in the Gallic left, conquered Maxentius and Licinius in the middle and Maximinus Daza in the east. Constantine was brought up in the Eastern Empire at the court of the senior emperor Diocletian. His share of the empire consisted of Britain, Gaul, and Spain, and he commanded one of the largest Roman armies which was stationed along the important Rhine frontier. Constantine followed a tolerant policy towards Christianity, although he was not yet a Christian. He probably judged it a more sensible policy than open persecution and a way to distinguish himself from the great persecutor Galerius. Constantine I, better known as the Great, reunified the empire, was the first Roman emperor to profess Christianity. He not only initiated the evolution of the empire into a Christian state but also provided the impulse for a distinctively Christian culture that prepared the way for the growth of Byzantine and Western medieval culture. And I saw how it allied the two heads with itself, and how the head turned with those that were with it, and devoured the two little wings that were planning to reign. Constantine had the backing of the military in the whole of the Roman Empire. On October 28 in 312 AD, Constantine defeated the superior forces of his rival Maxentius, a Christian persecutor. At the Battle of Milvian Bridge, he took control of the middle part of empire. We see the two puny wings devoured by 313. A great result for Christians, and we see how the prophecy unfolds. The Edict of Milan was the February 313 AD agreement to treat Christians benevolently within the Roman Empire, and it gave Christianity legal status and a reprieve from persecution, but did not make it the state church of the Roman Empire until 380 AD with the Edict of Thessalonica. Let's go on. As for your seeing three heads at rest, this is the interpretation. In its last days the Most High will raise up three kings, and they shall renew many things in it, and shall rule the earth, and its inhabitants more oppressively than all who were before them. Therefore they are called the heads of the eagle, because it is they who shall sum up his wickedness and perform his last actions. As for your seeing that the large head disappeared, one of the kings shall die in his bed, but in agonies. We further identify Constantine the Great, as he died due to terminal illness in May 337. We can assume in great agonies. Moreover, this head gained control of the whole earth, and with much oppression dominated its inhabitants. It had greater power over the world than all the wings that had gone before. Constantine was called the Great for a reason. He ruled with absolute power between 324 to 337. The age of Constantine marked a distinct epoch in the history of the Roman Empire and a pivotal moment in the transition from classical antiquity to the Middle Ages. He built a new imperial residence in the city of Byzantium and renamed it New Rome, later adopting the name Constantinople after himself, where it was located in modern Istanbul. The head of Roman Empire was no longer in the middle. To understand his rise to power, a short recap of his famous battle at Milvian Bridge. Maxentius' forces were still twice the size of Constantine's, and he organized them in long lines facing the battle plain with their backs to the river. Constantine's army arrived on the field bearing unfamiliar symbols on their standards and their shields. According to Lactantius, Constantine was directed in a dream to cause the heavenly sign to be delineated on the shields of his soldiers, and so to proceed to battle. He did as he had been commanded, and he marked on their shields the letter Chi, with a perpendicular line drawn through it, and turned round thus at the top, being the cipher of Christ. Having this sign, his troops stood to arms. Eusebius describes a vision that Constantine had while marching at midday, in which he saw with his own eyes the trophy of a cross of light in the heavens, above the sun, and bearing the inscription, In hoc signo vinces, in this sign thou shalt conquer. In Eusebius's account, Constantine had a dream the following night in which Christ appeared with the same heavenly sign. Eusebius is vague about when and where these events took place, but it enters his narrative before the war begins against Maxentius. He describes the sign as she traversed by road to form the sign, representing the first two letters of the Greek word Christos. He played a pivotal role in elevating the status of Christianity in Rome, decriminalizing Christian practice and ceasing Christian persecution in a period referred to as the Constantinian shift. This initiated the cessation of the established ancient Roman religion. Constantine is also the originator of the religio-political ideology known as Constantinianism, which epitomizes the unity of church and state, as opposed to separation of church and state. He eventually emerged victorious in the civil wars against Emperors Maxentius and Licinius to become the sole ruler of the Roman Empire by 324 AD. The founder of the Byzantine Empire and its first emperor, Constantine the Great, moved the capital of the Roman Empire to the city of Byzantium in 330 AD, and renamed it Constantinople. After this I looked again and saw the head in the middle suddenly disappear, just as the wings had done. After Constantine's death in 337 AD, apparently without naming his heirs, the empire was again divided in three parts. Constantine II on the left, Constans I in the middle, Constantius II on the right. We again see that family feuds erupt as Constantine II was the oldest brother and should have been heir to the throne. The son of the Emperor Constantine the Great, he was proclaimed Caesar by his father shortly after his birth. Constantine II tried to take away the throne from his teenage brother Constans in Rome, after only 3 years. Constantine then attacked his brother Constans, but he was defeated, and now the Roman Empire was divided in only two parts. Constans in the west and Constantius II in the east. But the two heads remained, which also in like manner ruled over the earth and its inhabitants. But as for the two who remained, the sword shall devour them. For the sword of one shall devour him who was with him, but he also shall fall by the sword in the last days. Constans was the last legitimate emperor to visit Britain. The usurper Magnus Magnentius killed Constans, and he died by the sword. Magnus Magnentius was of Germanic descent. Magnentius served with distinction in Gaul under the Emperor Constans. In 350 AD, Magnentius was acclaimed Augustus. Quickly killing the unpopular Constans, Magnentius gained control over most of the Western Empire. The Eastern Emperor Constantius II, the brother of Constans, refused to acknowledge Magnentius' legitimacy and led a successful campaign against Magnentius. Ultimately, Magnentius' forces were scattered after the Battle of Mons Seleucus, and he died by suicide on August 10, 353. We continue. And while I looked, I saw the head on the right side devour the one on the left. We have our last head on the right, Constantius, an emperor over the whole of the Roman Empire till 361, promoted Arianism, banned pagan sacrifices, and issued laws against Jews. Then I heard a voice saying to me, "Look in front of you and consider what you see." When I looked, I saw what seemed to be a lion roused from the forest, roaring, and I heard how it uttered a human voice to the eagle, and spoke, saying, "Listen and I will speak to you." The Most High says to you, Are you not the one that remains of the 4 beasts that I had made to reign in my world, so that the end of my times might come through them? You, the 4th that has come, have conquered all the beasts that have gone before, and you have held sway over the world with great terror, and over all the earth with grievous oppression, and for so long you have lived on the earth with deceit. You have judged the earth, but not with truth. For you have oppressed the meek and injured the peaceable. You have hated those who tell the truth, and have loved liars. You have destroyed the homes of those who brought forth fruit, and have laid low the walls of those who did you no harm. Your insolence has come up before the Most High, and your pride to the Mighty One. The Most High has looked at his times. Now they have ended, and his ages have reached completion. Therefore you, eagle, will surely disappear, you and your terrifying wings, your most evil little wings, your malicious heads, your most evil talons, and your whole worthless body. So that the whole earth, freed from your violence, may be refreshed and relieved, and may hope for the judgment and mercy of him who made it. We move on to chapter 12. While the lion was saying these words to the eagle, I looked, and saw that the remaining head had disappeared. The 2 wings that had gone over to it rose up and set themselves up to reign, and their reign was brief and full of tumult. We are looking for the last 2 puny wings. The first is an obvious choice, and his name says it all. Julian the Apostate and cousin of Constantius claimed the rank of Augustus in 360, leading to war between the two, after Constantius' attempts to persuade Julian to back down failed. No battle was fought, as Constantius became ill and died of fever in 361 AD, allegedly naming Julian as his rightful successor before his death. It seems a bit suspect that he would name the person that led a revolt against him as his heir and die of a fever on his way to war. We know this is not how Game of Thrones work. Julian reigned from December 361 to 363. He was regarded as a usurper, and not an elected official. A persistent enemy of Christianity, he publicly announced his conversion to paganism in 361, thus acquiring the epithet, the Apostate. The younger son of Julius Constantius, the half-brother of Constantine the Great. Killed by his cousin Constantius II, who also appears to have led a massacre of most of Julian's close relatives. Julian was spared and time for his revenge. He was the last non-Christian ruler of the Roman Empire, and he believed that it was necessary to restore the empire's ancient Roman values and traditions in order to save it from dissolution. He purged the top-heavy state bureaucracy and attempted to revive traditional Roman religious practices at the expense of Christianity. Julian also forbade Christians from teaching and learning classical texts. Julian's conversion from Christianity to paganism happened at around the age of 20. Looking back on his life in 362, he wrote that he had spent 20 years in the way of Christianity and 12 in the true way, the way of Helios. He was also initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, which he would later try to restore. He tried to restore the Apollo Theater, but the temple was destroyed by fire. Julian suspected the Christians. On February 4, 362, Julian promulgated an edict to guarantee freedom of religion. This edict proclaimed that all the religions were equal before the law, and that the Roman Empire had to return to its original religious eclecticism, according to which the Roman state did not impose any religion on its provinces. The edict was seen as an act of favor toward the Jews, in order to upset the Christians. Since the persecution of Christians by past Roman emperors had seemingly only strengthened Christianity, many of his actions may have been designed to harass Christians and undermine their ability to organize resistance to the re-establishment of paganism in the empire. In his Tolerance Edict of 362, Julian decreed the reopening of pagan temples, the restitution of confiscated temple properties, and the return from exile of heretical Christian bishops who had been censured or excommunicated by the Church. In 363, not long before Julian left Antioch to launch his campaign against Persia, in keeping with his effort to oppose Christianity, he allowed Jews to rebuild their temple. The point was that the rebuilding of the temple would invalidate Jesus' prophecy about its destruction in 70 AD, which Christians had cited as proof of Jesus' truth. But fires broke out and stopped the project. A personal friend of his, Ammianus Marcellinus, wrote this about the effort. Julian thought to rebuild at an extravagant expense the proud temple once at Jerusalem, and committed this task to Alypius of Antioch. Alypius set vigorously to work, and was seconded by the governor of the province, when fearful balls of fire, breaking out near the foundations, continued their attacks, till the workmen, after repeated scorchings, could approach no more, and he gave up the attempt. The failure to rebuild the temple may be ascribed to the Galilee earthquake of 363. Even Napoleon tried to rebuild the temple and failed. We see this happening again today, and I believe it is doomed to fail. At the Battle of Samarra near Maranga in Mesopotamia, Julian was wounded. He received a wound from a spear that reportedly pierced the lower lobe of his liver and intestines. The wound was not immediately deadly. Some Christian writers reported that his final words were, "Thou hast conquered, Galilean," supposedly expressing his recognition that after his death, Christianity would become the empire's state religion. Julian is probably not the little horn in Daniel, but it sure is interesting when we draw comparisons. Daniel had 10 horns. Revelation had 7 heads, and Esdras tells us about 3 more. The last 3 kings, or last 3 heads, fell in front of Julian as he was brought up in their court. Daniel tells us, "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame." We see the last of the 8 puny wings. As for your seeing 2 little wings passing over to the head which was on the right side, this is the interpretation. It is these whom the Most High has kept for the eagle's end. This was the reign which was brief and full of tumult, as you have seen. Julian was succeeded by the short-lived and most forgotten Emperor Jovian. With only a 7-month reign, he re-established Christianity's privileged position throughout the empire. Jovian was proclaimed emperor by his troops after Julian was killed in 363 AD. To extricate his army from Persia, the new ruler immediately concluded a peace deal, ceding to the Persians all Roman territory east of the Tigris River. As a Christian, Jovian disapproved of paganism, which had been encouraged under his predecessor. Magical practices were forbidden and gifts to churches restored. Julian and Jovian were the last sole emperors to rule the whole empire for their entire reign, after which it was divided between a western and eastern court. We see that the prophecy was fulfilled, and yet the story is not over yet, as Christianity still had to display its newfound dominance. In 347 AD, Theodosius the Great was last emperor to rule over West and East in a diminished empire, but only for a while and at the end of his reign. His reign started in the East, and we see a shift in vigorous suppression of paganism and Arianism. He established the former Nicene Creed as the universal norm for Christian orthodoxy. He directed the convening of the Second General Council at Constantinople in 381 to clarify the formula. He was the first emperor who did not assume the title of Pontifex Maximus, supreme guardian of the old Roman cults. He believed only persons who believed in the consubstantiality of God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were henceforth to be considered Catholic Christians, a designation that here appears for the first time in a document. The persecution of pagans under Theodosius began in 381, after the first couple of years of his reign as co-emperor in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. In the 380s, Theodosius reiterated the ban of Constantine the Great on animal sacrifices, pioneered the criminalization of magistrates who did not enforce anti-pagan laws, broke up some pagan associations, and destroyed pagan temples. In 389 he issued the Theodosian Decrees, which established a practical ban on paganism. Visits to the temples were forbidden, the remaining pagan holidays that had not yet been rendered Christian were abolished, the sacred fire in the Temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum was extinguished as the Vestal Virgins were disbanded, and auspices and witchcraft were deemed punishable offenses. Theodosius refused to restore the altar of victory in the Senate House, as requested by pagan senators. He authorized or participated in the destruction of many temples, holy sites, images and objects of piety throughout the empire and actions by Christians against major pagan sites. He reiterated the ban of blood sacrifice and decreed, "No one is to go to the sanctuaries, walk through the temples, or raise his eyes to statues created by the labor of man." Emperor Theodosius banned the Olympic Games in 393 AD in order to promote Christianity. He deemed the games equivalent to paganism and had them done away with. It was only restored in 1894 in Paris, around 1,000 years after the French Revolution, where millions of Christians were martyred. I see this as the start of the fall of the Roman Empire. The Western Gallic regions were lost, and even though it had breakaway rulers till around 400 AD, it was not part of Roman Empire anymore. With the Roman Empire now split in two, the western side has mostly lost control and would struggle on, till about 476 AD. We continue. When I looked again, they were already vanishing. The whole body of the eagle was burned, and the earth was exceedingly terrified. Then I woke up in great perplexity of mind and great fear, and I said to my spirit. We see a similar verse in Daniel 7. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. It seems as if the church age or iron and clay kingdom was set up. This would last around 1,000 years if our calendars and history is correct. Let's continue the prophecy. We skip forward to verse 31 as we have already included some of the interpretations. And as for the lion whom you saw rousing up out of the forest and roaring and speaking to the eagle and reproving him for his unrighteousness, and as for all his words that you have heard, this is the Messiah whom the Most High has kept until the end of days, who will arise from the offspring of David, and will come and speak with them. He will denounce them for their ungodliness and for their wickedness, and will display before them their contemptuous dealings. For first he will bring them alive before his judgment seat, and when he has reproved them, then he will destroy them. But in mercy he will set free the remnant of my people, those who have been saved throughout my borders, and he will make them joyful until the end comes, the day of judgment, of which I spoke to you at the beginning. This is the dream that you saw, and this is its interpretation. And you alone were worthy to learn this secret of the Most High. Therefore write all these things that you have seen in a book, put it in a hidden place. And you shall teach them to the wise among your people, whose hearts you know are able to comprehend and keep these secrets. Before we continue, it is necessary that we look at time indicators given to us in the book of Esdras. The first is quite complexing and will give a few options. In chapter 14 he tells us, "And now I say to you, lay up in your heart the signs that I have shown you, the dreams that you have seen, and the interpretations that you have heard. For you shall be taken up from among humankind, and henceforth you shall live with my Son and with those who are like you, until the times are ended. The age has lost its youth, and the times begin to grow old. For the age is divided into 12 parts, and 9 of its parts have already passed. As well as half of the 10th part, so 2 of its parts remain, besides half of the 10th part." We are reminded of Daniel written at the same time, and also the book of Revelation. Times and a half. 2.5 parts are left. I have found times to be 500 years or 10 jubilees, which would make it around 1,250 years. In Revelation and Daniel we are told it is 1,260 days, which is close enough as we are not sure how the calendar worked. In the Bible you have occasions where prophetic days equals 1 year. We know the days were fulfilled in 70 AD, and we are looking at a double fulfillment, but in years. We can easily work out a timeline presuming that Esdras lived around 3500 AM or 5000 AM, around 500 years before the crucifixion. Depending on what calendar you use, as Byzantine and Jewish calendars have large discrepancies. Either way, we see an end date ranging from 450 AD to 780 AD, which aligns with the fall of the beast kingdom and start of the iron and clay kingdom. Question is, when will Jesus destroy the kingdoms with the mountain not carved out by hands? This also seems to line up with Enoch's 10-week prophecy. We see some important dates for Christians in this time period as follows. The Edict of Milan, First Council of Nicaea, last pagan emperor, Christianity made state religion of Roman Empire, St. Augustine converts to Christianity, Theodosius edicts, Jerome completes the Vulgate, Rome sacked by Visigoths, Council of Ephesus, apocalyptic events in the late antique Little Ice Age, wars with the Vandals, simultaneous volcanic eruptions marked with an 18-month volcanic winter. Constantinople began experiencing darkened skies and lower temperatures. Justinian plague or Black Death with millions of deaths, wiping out 1/3 to 1/2 of the population of the Eastern Roman Empire and hastening its collapse. More volcanic eruptions and famine due to crop failures. Who knew the Dark Ages was literally dark? In 538 AD, the Roman statesman Cassiodorus described the following. The sun's rays were weak, and they appeared a bluish color. At noon, no shadows from people were visible on the ground. The heat from the sun was feeble. The moon, even when full, was empty of splendor. A winter without storms, a spring without mildness, and a summer without heat. Prolonged frost and unseasonable drought. The seasons seemed to be all jumbled up together. The sky is described as blended with alien elements just like cloudy weather, except prolonged. It was stretched like a hide across the sky and prevented the true colors of the sun and moon from being seen, along with the sun's warmth. Frost during harvest, which made apples harden and grapes sour. The need to use stored food to last through the situation. 873 grams of grain exchanged for 43 grams of gold, reflecting the scarcity of grain during this time. Many similar experiences documented from China to Peru. A mysterious fog plunged Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia into darkness, day and night, for 18 months. We then move into a new era with new religious beliefs in the Dark Ages with a very unconvincing history and many time discrepancies. In 6th century we see a shift. We had the first Pope, Gregory. Start of Catholic Church and Muhammad started Islam in 613. We now move to chapter 13. Judea was judged in 70 AD. Israel and Rome have been judged around 6th century, and the 1,000 years have ended. We see the return of Jesus, and what is known as the Gog and Magog War of Revelations. I could probably say quite a lot, but will leave the passages to speak for itself. If you have studied hidden history or biblical cosmology, you will find this intriguing. Before we go through it, a quick reminder of biblical prophecy. We see the end described in Revelation 20. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And in Daniel we see the event described as follows. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Forasmuch as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. The return of Jesus Christ. After 7 days I dreamed a dream in the night. And lo, a wind arose from the sea and stirred up all its waves. As I kept looking, the wind made something like the figure of a man come up out of the heart of the sea. And I saw that this man flew with the clouds of heaven, and wherever he turned his face to look, everything under his gaze trembled. And whenever his voice issued from his mouth, all who heard his voice melted as wax melts when it feels the fire. After this I looked and saw that an innumerable multitude of people were gathered together from the four winds of heaven to make war against the man who came up out of the sea. And I looked and saw that he carved out for himself a great mountain, and flew up onto it. And I tried to see the region or place from which the mountain was carved, but I could not. After this I looked and saw that all who had gathered together against him, to wage war with him, were filled with fear, and yet they dared to fight. When he saw the onrush of the approaching multitude, he neither lifted his hand nor held a spear or any weapon of war. But I saw only how he sent forth from his mouth something like a stream of fire, and from his lips a flaming breath, and from his tongue he shot forth a storm of sparks. All these were mingled together, the stream of fire, and the flaming breath and the great storm, and fell on the onrushing multitude that was prepared to fight, and burned up all of them, so that suddenly nothing was seen of the innumerable multitude but only the dust of ashes and the smell of smoke. When I saw it, I was amazed. After this I saw the same man come down from the mountain, and call to himself another multitude that was peaceable. Then many people came to him, some of whom were joyful and some sorrowful, some of them were bound, and some were bringing others as offerings. Then I woke up in great terror, and prayed to the Most High, and said, From the beginning you have shown your servant these wonders, and have deemed me worthy to have my prayer heard by you. Now show me the interpretation of this dream also. For as I consider it in my mind, alas for those who will be left in those days. And still more, alas for those who are not left. For those who are not left will be sad, because they understand the things that are reserved for the last days, but cannot attain them. But alas for those also who are left, and for that very reason. For they shall see great dangers and much distress, as these dreams show. Yet it is better to come into these things, though incurring peril, than to pass from the world like a cloud, and not to see what will happen in the last days. He answered me and said, I will tell you the interpretation of the vision, and I will also explain to you the things that you have mentioned. As for what you said about those who survive, and concerning those who do not survive, this is the interpretation. The one who brings the peril at that time will protect those who fall into peril, who have works and faith toward the Almighty. Understand therefore that those who are left are more blessed than those who have died. This is the interpretation of the vision. As for your seeing a man come up from the heart of the sea, this is he whom the Most High has been keeping for many ages, who will himself deliver his creation, and he will direct those who are left. And as for your seeing wind and fire and a storm coming out of his mouth, and as for his not holding a spear or weapon of war, yet destroying the onrushing multitude that came to conquer him, this is the interpretation. The days are coming when the Most High will deliver those who are on the earth. And bewilderment of mind shall come over those who inhabit the earth. They shall plan to make war against one another, city against city, place against place, people against people, and kingdom against kingdom. When these things take place and the signs occur that I showed you before, then my Son will be revealed, whom you saw as a man coming up from the sea. Then, when all the nations hear his voice, all the nations shall leave their own lands and the warfare that they have against one another. And an innumerable multitude shall be gathered together, as you saw, wishing to come and conquer him. But he shall stand on the top of Mount Zion. And Zion shall come and be made manifest to all people, prepared and built, as you saw the mountain carved out without hands. Then he, my Son, will reprove the assembled nations for their ungodliness. This was symbolized by the storm. And will reproach them to their face with their evil thoughts and the torments with which they are to be tortured, which were symbolized by the flames, and will destroy them without effort by means of the law, which was symbolized by the fire. And as for your seeing him gather to himself another multitude that was peaceable, these are the 9 tribes that were taken away from their own land into exile in the days of King Hoshea, whom Shalmaneser, king of the Assyrians, made captives. He took them across the river, and they were taken into another land. But they formed this plan for themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the nations and go to a more distant region, where no human beings had ever lived, so that there at least they might keep their statutes that they had not kept in their own land. And they went in by the narrow passages of the Euphrates River. For at that time the Most High performed signs for them, and stopped the channels of the river until they had crossed over. Would just like to interject that we are not talking about the river in the Middle East but the original rivers flowing out of Eden, trenches covered in oceans today after the flood. I believe it to be a region not found on our current maps. Through that region there was a long way to go, a journey of a year and a half, and that country is called Arzareth. Then they lived there until the last times, and now, when they are about to come again, the Most High will stop the channels of the river again, so that they may be able to cross over. Therefore you saw the multitude gathered together in peace. But those who are left of your people, who are found within my holy borders, shall be saved. Therefore when he destroys the multitude of the nations that are gathered together, he will defend the people who remain. And then he will show them very many wonders. I said, O sovereign Lord, explain this to me. Why did I see the man coming up from the heart of the sea? He said to me, just as no one can explore or know what is in the depths of the sea, so no one on earth can see my son or those who are with him, except in the time of his day. This is the interpretation of the dream that you saw. And you alone have been enlightened about this. Because you have forsaken your own ways and have applied yourself to mine, and have searched out my law. For you have devoted your life to wisdom, and called understanding your mother. Therefore I have shown you these things, for there is a reward laid up with the Most High. For it will be that after 3 more days I will tell you other things, and explain weighty and wondrous matters to you. Then I got up and walked in the field, giving great glory and praise to the Most High for the wonders that he does from time to time. And because he governs the times and whatever things come to pass in their seasons. And I stayed there 3 days. We came to the end of the video. I hope you learned some history and hopefully entertained some interesting possible outcomes. The prophecy itself seems to be historically correct, at least till the fall of the Roman Empire, but further than that it seems to be symbolic, very similar to Revelations. We can't take it too literal, and we truly still have no idea. It leaves us with many questions about the world we live in, and where we currently find ourselves. This is your journey, and for you to research, using your Bible as the main source. So far, I have found very few contradictions, and it only seemed to collaborate with Bible prophecy. What it does, however, strongly contradict is our earthly doctrines given to us by man. You are welcome to watch my videos on Daniel and Enoch for a better understanding. Does not matter when and when we are, as we are already saved, and don't fear the world as we are not from this world. God bless.